At the company meeting, my grandson said, "You're the leech holding this business back." Those words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs and making my chest tighten with a pain I'd never experienced before. I sat there, in my usual chair at the head of the conference table, the same table where I'd made countless decisions over the past 25 years. The same room where I'd built Greenfield landscapes from nothing more than a dream and a used pickup truck. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the edge of the mahogany surface, trying to process what had just happened. Tyler stood there, tall and confident in his expensive suit, the one I'd helped him buy for his business school graduation 3 years ago. His blue eyes, so much like his grandfather's, held no warmth as he looked down at me. The boy I'd raised since he was 10 years old, the child I'd loved as my own son, had just destroyed me in front of everyone who mattered in my professional. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. World, Margaret, he continued, his voice steady and cold. The numbers don't lie. Under your leadership, we've been bleeding money for months. The clients are losing confidence, and frankly, so is the board. Board. When had we started calling? Our small team of 8 employees aboard? When had my weekly staff meetings become formal presentations, where my own grandson felt entitled to humiliate me? I glanced around the room at faces I'd known for years. Sarah, my landscape designer, who I'd hired straight out of college when no one else would give her a chance. Miguel, my foreman, whose daughter's quinceañera I'd helped pay for when times were tough. Even Patricia, my bookkeeper, who'd been with me since the beginning, couldn't meet my eyes. Tyler, I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning. What are you doing? He exchanged a quick glance with his wife, Sophia, who sat in the corner taking notes on her tablet. She'd been attending these meetings for the past 6 months, claiming she wanted to understand the family business better. Now I realized she'd been documenting everything, probably building a case against me. I'm saving this company, Margaret, Tyler said, using my first name instead of Grandma, a deliberate choice that cut deeper than any insult. Someone has to make the hard decisions around here, the hard decisions. As if I hadn't been making hard decisions every single day for a quarter century. As if I hadn't worked 16-hour days when Tyler was in high school, making sure there was enough money for his college fund. As if I hadn't sold my dream house to keep the business afloat during the recession of 2008, the same recession that nearly destroyed everything I'd built. I remembered that 10-year-old boy who'd come to live with me after his parents died in that car accident. He'd been so small, so broken, clutching his stuffed elephant and asking me when Mommy and Daddy were coming home. I'd held him while he cried, promised him he'd always have a family with me, that I'd take care of everything. The landscape industry is changing, Tyler continued, clicking through slides on his laptop. We need fresh leadership, modern approaches. Margaret's methods are outdated, and frankly, her decision-making has become questionable. Questionable. The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I knew exactly what he was implying. At 68, I was old, possibly senile, definitely incapable of running the business I'd created from scratch. Tyler, please, I said, finding my voice again. Can we discuss this privately? No, Margaret. These discussions need to happen transparently, with the entire team present. He gestured to the room. Everyone here has invested their careers in Greenfield landscapes. They deserve to know the truth about our financial situation and our plans. For the future. Our plans. When had my business become ours? When had my grandson decided he had the right to speak for everyone in this room? I watched as he continued his presentation, outlining cost-cutting measures that would eliminate some of our oldest employees, changes to our client relationships that would prioritize profit over the personal service we'd always been known for, and a complete restructuring of management that would, coincidentally, place him in charge of all major decisions. The Tyler presenting this cold, calculated takeover wasn't the boy I'd tucked into bed every night for 8 years. This wasn't the teenager who'd called me crying from college when he felt overwhelmed, or the young man who'd brought me flowers every Mother's Day, because he said I was the closest thing to a mother he'd ever really known. I think that covers everything for today, Tyler said, closing his laptop with a decisive snap. Margaret, I'll need you to sign these documents transferring operational authority to me by Friday. He slid a folder across the table toward me. My hands shook as I opened it, scanning legal documents that had clearly been prepared weeks ago. Documents that would strip me of any real power in my own company while allowing me to keep the meaningless title of Founder Emeritus. "What if I refuse?" I asked quietly. Tyler's expression didn't change, but I caught something cold flickering in his eyes. "I don't think that would be in anyone's best interest, Margaret, especially not yours." The room was silent except for the sound of chairs scraping against the floor as people began to leave. No one looked at me. No one offered support or questioned Tyler's authority. They filed out one by one, leaving me sitting alone at the table. With the documents that would sign away everything I'd worked for, Tyler and Sophia were the last to leave. As they reached the door, he turned back to me. "This isn't personal, Margaret," he said, his voice softer now but still devoid of any real affection. "It's just business. Just business. 25 years of my life, reduced to just business." Sat there for a long time after they left, staring at the papers in front of me. The silence felt suffocating. This was the conference room where I'd celebrated our first $1 million year, where I'd announced Christmas bonuses, where I'd held Tyler's hand and promised him he'd always have a place in this company. How had it come to this? How had the child I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, become someone who could look me in the eye and call me a leech? But as I sat there in the growing darkness, one thought kept echoing in my mind. Tyler had made one crucial mistake in his carefully planned coup. He'd assumed I was weak, that I'd simply roll over and accept his version of the truth. He'd forgotten that I'd built this company from nothing once before, and he had no idea what I was truly capable of when cornered. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's face, heard his cold voice calling me a leech. By 4 a.m, I gave up trying and made myself a cup of coffee, sitting at my kitchen table as dawn slowly crept across the sky. The documents Tyler had given me lay spread across the surface, each page a carefully crafted piece of my professional execution. But something nagged at me. The language was too polished, too precise for Tyler to have written alone. He was smart, but this level of legal manipulation required experience he didn't have. I called my old friend Dr. Harrison at 7, knowing he'd be awake. Richard Harrison had been our family attorney for over 30 years, handling everything from my husband's estate to the business incorporation papers. "Margaret," his warm voice came through the phone. "I was wondering when you'd call. You know, what happened? I've heard rumors. Tyler contacted me 3 weeks ago asking about procedures for declaring someone mentally incompetent to run a business." My coffee cup slipped from my hands, shattering against the kitchen floor. "He what?" "I told him I couldn't discuss such matters without your consent, of course. But Margaret, I think you need to know what you're dealing with here." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Richard's office listening to details that made my blood run cold. Tyler hadn't just decided to take over the company on a whim. This had been planned for months. "He's been asking questions about your decision-making process, whether you've seemed confused lately, if anyone's noticed memory issues," Richard explained, his kind eyes filled with concern. "He even suggested bringing in a psychiatric evaluator to assess your competency." "But I'm fine," I said, my voice shaking. "Richard, you know I'm fine." "Of course you are. But Tyler seems to believe otherwise. Or he wants others to believe it." The pieces started falling into place. Tyler's sudden interest in attending company meetings. Sophia's constant note-taking. The way certain employees had started speaking. To me, more slowly, more carefully, as if I might not understand complex concepts. "There's more," Richard said gently. "Tyler has been meeting with other attorneys. He's exploring options for having you declared incapacitated." I felt like I was drowning. The boy I'd raised was systematically destroying my reputation, my competency, my very sense of self. But why? That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through Tyler's office at the company. As the owner, I had every right, but it felt like a violation of trust. Then again, Tyler had already violated something far more precious. Hidden. In his desk drawer, I found a folder labeled Restructuring Plans. Inside were documents that revealed the true scope of his betrayal. Tyler hadn't just been planning to take over operations. He'd been working with Sophia to completely restructure the company's ownership. There were contract drafts with new clients, contracts that would pay significantly higher fees but required a younger, more dynamic leadership team. There were emails between Tyler and Sophia discussing how to phase out the old guard and bring in fresh talent. Most damning of all, there was a timeline outlining how they planned to gradually diminish my role until I could be forced into retirement. But the worst discovery came in a text message thread between Tyler and Sophia that he'd printed out and forgotten in the folder. Reading their words felt like being stabbed repeatedly. "She's getting suspicious," Tyler had written. "We need to move faster." "Don't worry," Sophia replied. "She's old and emotional. Everyone expects her to make poor decisions at her age. I just need her to sign the transfer documents. Once I have operational control, the rest will be easy." "You're doing the right thing, baby. She had her time. This is ours now." I sat in Tyler's chair, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, and felt something inside me break. Not my spirit, but my last vestige of hope that this was somehow a misunderstanding. Tyler wasn't trying to save the company. He was trying to steal it. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Sarah, my landscape designer. "Margaret, I need to talk to you," she said quietly. "Can you meet me somewhere private?" An hour later, we sat in a small cafe across town. Sarah's hands wrapped around her coffee cup, like she was trying to warm herself. "I couldn't say anything in the meeting," she began, "but you need to know what's been happening." "Tell me." "Tyler's been talking to all of us individually. He says you're having memory problems, that you've been making decisions that don't make sense. He told Miguel you forgot about the Henderson project entirely, and that's why we lost the contract." "That's not true. We lost Henderson because they wanted us to use cheaper materials that wouldn't last." "I know. I was there for that meeting, but Tyler's been telling a different story." Sarah leaned forward. "He's also been promising people raises and promotions if they support the restructuring. Patricia thinks she's going to become head bookkeeper for the entire Southwest region." "What Southwest region?" "Exactly. Margaret, Tyler's been painting a picture of massive expansion, new opportunities, bigger salaries, and he's been positioning your leadership as the only thing standing in the way." I stared out the cafe window, watching people go about their normal lives, oblivious to the fact that mine was being systematically dismantled. "There's something else," Sarah said hesitantly. "Sophia's been asking questions about your personal life. Whether you live alone, if you have family checking on you, if anyone would notice if you seemed different." A chill ran down my spine. "Different how?" She didn't specify. "But Margaret, I'm scared for you. This doesn't feel like a simple business takeover anymore." That evening, I sat in my living room, surrounded by photo albums and memories. Pictures of Tyler at 10, 12, 16, graduating from college. In every photo, I was there beside him, smiling proudly. I'd been his mother, his father, his biggest supporter. I picked up a photo from his 18th birthday. Tyler was blowing out candles on a cake I'd made myself, shaped like a football because he'd just made varsity. In the background, you could see the modest apartment we'd moved to after I sold my house to pay for his private school tuition. He'd hugged me that night, told me I was the best grandmother in the world, promised he'd make me proud someday. Set the photo down and reached for my phone. If Tyler wanted to play games, he'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd built this company once with nothing but determination and grit. I could certainly protect it from someone who'd forgotten where his loyalties should lie. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went. And I had a feeling tomorrow would bring even more devastating revelations. I spent the next morning going through old financial records, trying to piece together the timeline of Tyler's betrayal. But as I sat surrounded by boxes of paperwork, my mind kept drifting back to the beginning, to the choices I'd made that had led us to this moment. Tyler had been 10 when his parents died. I can still remember getting that phone call at midnight, the police officer's voice gentle but firm as he explained about the accident. A drunk driver had hit their car head-on coming home from their anniversary dinner. My daughter Sarah and her husband Mark were gone, and Tyler was in the hospital with a broken arm and a heart that would never fully heal. I'd driven through the night to reach him, finding him in a sterile hospital room, staring at the ceiling, with those huge blue eyes. When he saw me, he didn't cry. He just asked, "Where am I going to live now, Grandma?" Without hesitation, I'd answered, "With me, sweetheart. Always with me." I was 55 then, recently widowed myself after losing my husband Robert to cancer the year before. I'd been planning to travel, maybe downsize to a smaller house, Finally take some time for myself after decades of caring for others. Instead, I became a mother again. The transition wasn't easy. Tyler struggled in school, had nightmares, and would sometimes wake up screaming for his parents. I sold my dream house in the hills and bought a smaller place in a good school district. The mortgage payments were higher, but Tyler needed stability. I remember the morning I realized my small landscaping business wasn't going to support both of us. I'd been doing design work for a few wealthy clients, making enough to supplement Robert's pension. But raising a child required more than I was bringing in. That's when I made the decision that would define the next 25 years of my life. I took out a loan against Robert's life insurance policy, bought proper equipment, and turned my hobby into a real business. I worked 18-hour days, coming home exhausted and covered in dirt. But Tyler never went without. I missed school plays because I was installing irrigation systems. I skipped vacation because equipment payments were due. I postponed dating entirely because Tyler needed me to be completely present in his life. "You're all I have, Grandma," he'd said one night when he was 12, after a particularly difficult day at school. "Promise me you'll never leave me like Mom and Dad did." I'd held him tight and sworn I'd always be there. I meant it then. I meant it for 18 years. When Tyler was 16, he'd started showing interest in the business. He'd come with me on jobs during summers, learning about plants and soil composition and client relations. I was so proud, thinking he genuinely wanted to be part of what I'd built. "This could be ours someday," I'd told him as we finished planting a memorial garden for one of our oldest clients. "A real family legacy." "I'd like that, Grandma," he'd said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You've taught me so much." I'd started grooming him then, teaching him every aspect of the business. When he went away to college, I'd call him weekly, with updates, asking his opinion on major decisions, making him feel valued and included even from a distance. After graduation, when he'd expressed interest in getting his MBA, I'd been the one to encourage him. "If you're going to run this company someday, you need proper business training," I'd said, secretly taking out another loan to help cover his tuition. He'd graduated with honors, and I'd been so proud watching him walk across that stage. In the audience, I'd wiped away tears thinking about Sarah and Mark, wishing they could see what an amazing man their son had become. When Tyler brought Sophia home for the first time 2 years ago, I'd welcomed her with open arms. She was beautiful, educated, ambitious. Everything I thought Tyler deserved. "She's got great ideas about modernizing the business," Tyler had told me after one of our family dinners. "Maybe we should start incorporating some of her suggestions." I'd been happy to listen. Sophia had an MBA too, and she'd worked for a consulting firm before they got married. Her ideas about digital marketing and customer relationship management seemed innovative and fresh. But now, sitting in my office surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I could see how naive I'd been. Every suggestion, every modernization, every small change had been part of a larger plan to push me out of my own company. I found a notebook in my desk drawer, one I'd used to jot down ideas during our family brainstorming sessions. Page after page of notes about Tyler's suggestions, Sophia's recommendations, their vision for the future of Greenfield landscapes. Except it was never about improving the company. It was about taking it over. I remembered a conversation from 6 months ago when Tyler had suggested I might want to step back a little, enjoy my golden years. "You've worked so hard for so long, Grandma," he'd said, his arm around my shoulders as we stood in the greenhouse. "Don't you think you deserve to relax?" I'd laughed it off. "Retire? Tyler, this business is my life. I'll work until I can't anymore." His smile had seemed forced even then. "But what if you didn't have to? What if the company was successful enough that you could just be the owner, not the daily operator?" I'd thought he was being considerate, worried about my health and happiness. Now I realized he'd been testing the waters, seeing if I'd willingly step aside. When I hadn't taken the hint, they'd decided to force me out. My phone rang, interrupting my painful trip down memory lane. It was Miguel, calling from the Hartley job site. "Mrs. Margaret, we have a problem," he said, his voice tense. "Mr. Tyler just left here, and he told the clients that you've been having some confusion lately about project details. Mrs. Hartley is asking if maybe they should work with someone else." "What did you tell them?" "I told them you're sharp as ever, but they seemed worried. Mrs. Hartley said Tyler mentioned you might be having some memory issues." My hands clenched around the phone. Tyler was actively sabotaging my relationships. with clients spreading rumors about my mental state to justify his takeover. Miguel, I need you to reassure the Hartleys that I'm fine. Tell them I'll be out there this afternoon to personally oversee the project. Yes, ma'am. But Mrs. Margaret, there's something else. Mr. Tyler said he's going to be taking over client relations from now on. He told me not to bother you with day-to-day problems anymore. After I hung up, I sat in my chair feeling the weight of 25 years of sacrifice pressing down on me. I'd given Tyler everything, my time, my money, my dreams, my future. I'd rebuilt my entire life around raising him and preparing him to be part of this business. And this was how he repaid me. By systematically destroying my reputation and stealing everything I'd worked for. But as I sat there, something crystallized in my mind. Tyler had underestimated me in the most fundamental way. He saw me as an aging woman who'd outlived her usefulness. He'd forgotten that I was the woman who'd built this company from nothing, who'd fought through personal tragedy and financial hardship to create something lasting. He'd also forgotten that I'd been protecting and providing for him for so long, that he'd never learned to truly fend for himself. Every opportunity he'd had, every advantage he'd enjoyed, had come through me. It was time Tyler learned what life looked like without his grandmother's safety net, and I was about to give him a very expensive education. I decided to take a different approach to understanding Tyler's betrayal. Instead of confronting him directly, I hired a private investigator. It felt wrong spying on my own grandson, but nothing about this situation felt normal anymore. The investigator, Janet Morrison, was a woman about my age who specialized in corporate fraud cases. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, and I explained the situation as objectively as I could. Corporate takeovers by family members are more common than you'd think, Janet said, stirring her coffee. Usually there's a financial motivation beyond just wanting control. Has Tyler been having money problems? Not that I know of. I pay him a good salary and Sophia has her consulting work. Let me dig around for a few days. People leave digital footprints everywhere these days. 3 days later, Janet called with information that made my stomach drop. Margaret, you need to see this in person. Can you come to my office? Janet's office was cluttered with computers and filing cabinets. She gestured for me to sit down and opened a thick folder. Your grandson has been very busy, she said, pulling out printed emails and financial documents. He's been in communication with several landscape companies, trying to sell client lists and proprietary information. She showed me email threads between Tyler and executives from Morrison Landscapes, our biggest competitor. They were discussing the purchase of our client database, our vendor contracts, and something called operational transition plans. What does that mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. It means Tyler's been negotiating to sell your entire business to your competition. Not just the client list, Margaret, the whole company. My vision blurred as I read through the documents. Tyler had been systematically cataloging every asset, every contract, every relationship Greenfield Landscapes had built over 25 years. He'd even provided Morrison with detailed financial projections, showing how profitable the company would be under more efficient management. There's more, Janet said gently. She pulled out another set of documents. Tyler took out significant loans over the past year, using his expected inheritance from you as collateral. What inheritance? I never promised him anything specific. According to these documents, he told the bank you'd verbally committed to leaving him the business and your personal assets. He's borrowed against money he doesn't actually have yet. The papers showed loans totaling nearly $300,000. Credit cards, personal loans, even a second mortgage on the house I'd helped him buy. Tyler was drowning in debt, and he'd counted on inheriting my company to solve his financial problems. How much debt? I asked weakly. Between Tyler and Sophia, they owe close to $500,000. The pressure from creditors has been mounting for months. Suddenly, everything made sense. Tyler wasn't just trying to take over the company because he thought he deserved it. He needed to take it over to avoid financial ruin. And if that meant destroying my reputation and declaring me incompetent, so be it. There's one more thing, Janet said, pulling out a final document. Tyler's been in touch with elder care attorneys about having you declared mentally incompetent. He's scheduled an evaluation with a psychiatrist for next week. He can't do that without my consent. Actually, he can. In Texas, family members can petition for competency hearings if they provide evidence of cognitive decline. Tyler's been building a case, documenting what he claims are examples of your poor decision-making and memory issues. Janet showed me a file Tyler had compiled, filled with fabricated incidents and twisted interpretations of normal business decisions. He'd documented everything from my choice to keep certain long-term employees to my preference for traditional marketing methods as evidence of cognitive decline. According to this, you've been showing signs of dementia for over a year, Janet said. Forgetting appointments, making contradictory decisions, becoming suspicious and paranoid. None of that is true. I know, but Tyler's been very thorough. He has statements from Sophia corroborating his observations, and he's apparently convinced some of your employees to provide supporting documentation. I felt sick thinking about my own staff being turned against me, manipulated into believing I was losing my mind. What happens if the psychiatrist sides with Tyler? He could be granted guardianship over you and your assets. You'd lose control of your finances, your business, essentially your entire life. I stared at the document spread across Janet's desk, trying to process the magnitude of Tyler's betrayal. This wasn't just about taking over the company. He was prepared to have me declared mentally incompetent, to strip away my independence and dignity, all to cover his own financial mistakes. The worst part was realizing how long this had been planned. The gradual changes in how Tyler spoke to me, the way Sophia had started treating me like I was fragile, the concerned looks from employees when I made perfectly reasonable decisions. They'd been laying groundwork for months, slowly building a narrative that I was no longer capable of running my own life. There's something else you should know, Janet said, pulling out her phone. I've been monitoring Tyler's communications. This morning, he called Morrison Landscapes and told them the sale should be finalized within 2 weeks. 2 weeks? He's planning to have you declared incompetent, assume control of your assets, and sell the company before you can fight back. The psychiatrist appointment is scheduled for Monday. If Tyler gets the evaluation he wants, he could have emergency guardianship by Wednesday. I sat in Janet's office feeling like my entire world was collapsing. The boy I'd raised, the grandson I'd sacrificed everything for, was prepared to steal my life's work and destroy my reputation to cover his own failures. What can I do? I asked. Janet smiled for the first time since I'd walked into her office. Quite a lot, actually. Tyler made several critical mistakes. First, he doesn't have any legal ownership of your company. Second, his communications with Morrison constitute attempted corporate espionage. And third, his plan to have you declared incompetent is based on fabricated evidence. She pulled out another folder. I've documented everything. The false statements, the financial fraud, the conspiracy with your competitors. Tyler thought he was being clever, but he left a digital trail that any competent attorney could follow. So what's our next move? We turn the tables. Tyler wants to play legal games? Fine. But this time, we play by the actual rules. As I left Janet's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Tyler had underestimated me in every possible way. He'd forgotten that I'd built a successful business by being smarter and tougher than my competitors. He'd assumed that because I loved him, I'd be easy to manipulate and control. He was about to learn how wrong he'd been, and this lesson was going to cost him everything. The weekend before Tyler's planned psychiatric evaluation, I went through the motions of normalcy while quietly preparing for war. I attended church, tended my garden, even had Sunday dinner with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. To anyone watching, I appeared to be a typical grandmother enjoying her retirement years. But behind the scenes, I was methodically building my counterattack. Richard. Harrison worked through the weekend, preparing legal documents that would protect my assets and establish my mental competency beyond any doubt. We scheduled my own psychological evaluation with Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a respected psychiatrist who specialized in elder care issues. Tyler's made a fundamental error, Richard explained as we sat in his office Sunday evening. He's proceeded as if he already has legal standing to make decisions on your behalf. But he doesn't. You've never granted him power of attorney. Never signed any documents giving him authority over your affairs. So the competency hearing won't matter if we can prove his motives are financial rather than protective, which, thanks to Janet's investigation, we absolutely can. Janet had spent the weekend compiling additional evidence of Tyler's deception. She'd discovered he'd been using my company credit cards for personal expenses, charging everything from Sophia's spa treatments to expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of. He's been essentially embezzling from you for months, Janet explained. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger automatic alerts, but it adds up to nearly $20,000 in unauthorized charges. The embezzlement hurt worse than the planned takeover. It meant Tyler had been stealing from me while looking me in the eye and calling me grandma, while accepting my love and support as if nothing had changed. On Monday morning, I played my part perfectly. I arrived at the company as usual, reviewed projects with Miguel, returned client calls. When Tyler suggested I might want to take the day off because I seemed a little tired, I simply smiled and said I felt fine. "Are you sure, Grandma? You seem scattered lately." "I'm perfectly fine, Tyler, but thank you for your concern." He exchanged a glance with Sophia, who was hovering nearby with her ever-present tablet. They were clearly expecting me to show signs of confusion or agitation that would support their narrative. Instead, I went about my business with calm efficiency. At 2 o'clock, Tyler announced he had an appointment and would be back later. I knew exactly where he was going, to meet with the psychiatrist he'd arranged to evaluate me. What he didn't know was that Dr. Chen had already spent 2 hours with me that morning, conducting a thorough competency assessment that I'd passed with flying colors. While Tyler was gone, I called an all-staff meeting. Sarah, Miguel, Patricia, and the rest of our small team gathered in the conference room, looking nervous and uncertain. "I want to address some concerns that have been raised about my leadership," I began, keeping my voice steady and professional. "I've become aware that some of you may have questions about my decision-making or my memory." Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Miguel stared at his hands. Sarah was the only one who met my eyes directly. "I want you to know that I've recently undergone a comprehensive psychological evaluation," I continued. "Dr. Elizabeth Chen has certified that I am mentally competent and fully capable of managing both my personal affairs and this business." I distributed copies of Dr. Chen's report, watching as my employees read through the detailed assessment. The relief on their faces was visible as they realized they'd been manipulated into doubting my capabilities. "I also want you to know that there have been some financial irregularities in our accounts that I'm currently investigating. If any of you have been approached about providing statements regarding my competency or business decisions, I'd appreciate if you'd speak with me directly." Patricia raised her hand tentatively. "Margaret, Tyler told us you'd been having trouble remembering project details. He said we should help you by documenting when you seemed confused." "And did you observe me being confused, Patricia?" She shook her head slowly. "No, ma'am. I mean, you ask a lot of questions, but you always have. You like to understand every detail of our projects." "That's exactly right. Asking questions isn't confusion, it's thoroughness." One by one, my employees began sharing how Tyler had approached them, asking them to document my supposed cognitive decline. He'd been particularly manipulative with Patricia, suggesting that her job security depended on supporting his version of events. "I thought I was helping," Patricia said, tears in her eyes. "Tyler said if I didn't document your problems, that you might make a mistake that could hurt the company." "Patricia, you've been loyal to this company for 15 years. Tyler's been here for less than 3. Who do you think really has this company's best interests at heart?" After the meeting, I sat alone in my office, feeling a mixture of sadness and determination. Tyler had manipulated people who trusted him, exploited their concern for me and their job security to build his case against me. My phone rang. It was Tyler, calling from Dr. Morrison's office. "Grandma, I'm with Dr. Morrison. He'd like to speak with you about scheduling an evaluation." "I'm afraid that won't be necessary, Tyler. I've already been evaluated by Dr. Chen, and I've been found completely competent." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Tyler's voice, sharper now. "You can't just choose your own doctor, Grandma. This needs to be an independent evaluation. Dr. Chen is independent. She's also the psychiatrist the court system uses for competency evaluations. Her assessment will carry more weight than anyone Dr. Morrison might recommend. We'll see about that." He hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Sophia stormed into my office without knocking. Gone was the sweet, concerned daughter-in-law act. Her face was flushed with anger, her carefully styled hair slightly disheveled. "You're ruining everything," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Do you have any idea how much money we've invested in this transition?" "Invested in what transition, Sophia? The transition where you steal my company? This business belongs to Tyler. You're too old to run it anymore, and everyone knows it." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. This was the real Sophia, the one who'd been hiding behind concerned smiles and helpful suggestions for 2 years. "Actually, Sophia, this business belongs to me. I built it, I own it, and I'll decide what happens to it. We'll fight you in court. We have documentation proving you're incompetent." "You mean the fabricated documentation? The false statements you convinced my employees to provide? I'm afraid that won't hold up in court, especially now that they've recanted their statements." Sophia's confidence wavered. "What are you talking about?" I'm talking about the fact that your entire case is built on lies. And lying to support a competency hearing is perjury, Sophia. That's a felony. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. As evening fell, I sat in my office reviewing the evidence Janet had compiled. Tyler's financial records, his communications with Morrison Landscapes, his embezzlement of company funds, his conspiracy to have me declared incompetent. It was all there, documented and verified. Tomorrow, I would reveal everything. Tyler thought he'd been playing chess, moving pieces around the board to achieve his inevitable victory. But he'd been playing checkers while I'd been planning a checkmate. He'd forgotten the most important rule of business. Never underestimate your opponent, especially when that opponent taught you everything you know. I called the meeting for Tuesday, morning at 9 o'clock sharp. The same conference room where Tyler had humiliated me just 1 week earlier would be the setting for his downfall. I arrived early, spreading documents across the mahogany table like pieces of evidence in a courtroom. Tyler and Sophia walked in together, both dressed in their most professional attire. Tyler carried a briefcase that I suspected contained the competency documents he'd been so eager for me to sign. Sophia had her tablet ready, probably prepared to record my supposed confusion for posterity. The rest of the staff filed in quietly. Richard Harrison entered last, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the room. Tyler's confident expression faltered when he saw our family attorney. "What's he doing here?" Tyler asked, gesturing toward Richard. "Dr. Harrison is here to witness some important announcements about the future of this company," I said calmly. "Please, everyone sit down." I stood at the head of the table, the same position I'd held for 25 years of company meetings. But this time, I wasn't the vulnerable grandmother being ambushed by her ungrateful family. I was the CEO of Greenfield Landscapes, and I was taking back control. "Last week, my grandson accused me of being a leech, holding this business back," I began, my voice steady and clear. "He suggested that my leadership was questionable, that my decision-making had become impaired. Today, I want to address those concerns directly." Tyler shifted in his seat, glancing at Sophia with growing unease. "First, I want everyone to know that I've undergone a comprehensive psychological evaluation with Dr. Elizabeth Chen. Dr. Chen has certified that I am mentally competent and fully capable of managing this business." I distributed copies of the evaluation to everyone at the table. Furthermore, I've conducted an internal audit of our company finances and discovered some disturbing irregularities. I placed the credit card statements in front of Tyler. Over the past year, approximately $20,000 in unauthorized charges have been made on company accounts. Tyler's face went pale. "Grandma, I can explain those." "No explanation necessary, Tyler. The charges speak for themselves. Spa treatments, expensive dinners, luxury items that have nothing to do with business operations." I turned to address the room. "I've also discovered that proprietary company information has been shared with our competitors without authorization." The email exchanges with Morrison Landscapes went onto the table next. "Tyler has been negotiating to sell our client database, our vendor contracts, and our entire operation to Morrison Landscapes behind my back." Sarah gasped. Miguel's hands clenched into fists. Patricia stared at Tyler with undisguised disgust. "This isn't what it looks like." "It looks like," Tyler said, his voice rising. "I was trying to explore options for the company's future." "Were you also trying to explore options when you took out $500,000 in loans using my assets as collateral?" I placed the loan documents on the table. "Or when you scheduled a psychiatric evaluation to have me declared incompetent so you could assume control of my finances?" The room was dead silent. Tyler looked like he was going to be sick. "Tyler," I continued, "you've embezzled from this company, conspired with our competitors, and attempted to defraud me of my life's work. All to cover your own financial irresponsibility." Sophia suddenly stood up. "This is ridiculous. Tyler is your grandson. He's family. Everything he did was to protect you from making mistakes that could hurt the business." I turned to face her, directly. "Sophia, you've been complicit in every aspect of this deception. You helped fabricate evidence of my incompetency. You encouraged my employees to document false concerns about my mental state, and you participated in the embezzlement scheme." "That's not true." "Janet Morrison is a private investigator who specializes in corporate fraud. She's documented everything." I nodded toward the back of the room, where Janet stood quietly by the door. "Every email, every financial transaction, every lie you've told over the past year." Tyler finally found his voice. Grandma, please, we can work this out. I made some mistakes, but we're family. You raised me, you love me. I do love you, Tyler. That's what makes this so heartbreaking. Then give me another chance. I'll pay back the money. I'll cancel the deal with Morrison. We can start over. I looked at my grandson, seeing not the successful businessman he pretended to be, but the scared, desperate young man drowning in debt and poor decisions. Tyler, do you remember what you said to me in this room last week? You called me a leech. You humiliated me in front of people I've worked with for decades. You made them question my competency and my value. I was wrong. I'm sorry. You're sorry because you got caught. If your plan had worked, if Morrison had agreed to buy the company, and if I'd been declared incompetent, you'd never have apologized. You'd have taken everything and justified it as being for my own good. Tyler's composure finally cracked completely. He dropped to his knees beside my chair, tears streaming down his face. Please, Grandma, I'm begging you. Give me one more chance. I'll do anything. I'll work for free. I'll sign over everything I own. Just don't destroy me. Looking down at him, I felt a complex mixture of love, disappointment, and resolve. This was the child I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for. But he was also the man who'd been prepared to steal my dignity and independence to cover his own failures. Tyler, I'm not destroying you. You destroyed yourself. I turned to Richard. Dr. Harrison, please proceed with the termination paperwork. Tyler Morrison, Richard said formally, you are hereby terminated from Greenfield Landscapes for embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate espionage. Security will escort you from the premises. And Sophia, I added, you are banned from company property. Any further contact will be considered harassment. Tyler remained on his knees, sobbing, Grandma, please, I have nowhere else to go. The creditors are coming after me. I'll lose everything. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from the woman who raised you. As security escorted Tyler and Sophia from the building, I felt a profound sadness settle over me. I'd lost my grandson, the child I'd loved as my own son. But I'd saved my company and my dignity. The following week, when I revealed the truth about Tyler's betrayal to our clients and vendors, the response was overwhelmingly supportive. The business community had never doubted my competency. They'd only been concerned about the rumors Tyler had been spreading. Within a month, Greenfield Landscapes was more successful than ever. I promoted Sarah to partner, made Miguel head of operations, and gave Patricia the raise Tyler had promised but never intended to deliver. Tyler filed for bankruptcy 3 months later. He and Sophia divorced 6 months after that, their marriage apparently unable to survive the financial and legal consequences of their failed scheme. He never contacted me again, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved across the country, working for a landscaping company in Oregon. Sometimes I wondered if he'd learned anything from our ordeal, if he'd grown into the man I'd once believed he could become. But mostly, I focused on the future. At 70 years old, I was finally free to run my company without the weight of family obligation or the fear of betrayal. I'd learned that love without respect is manipulation, and that family loyalty must flow both ways. The business I'd built from nothing would continue without Tyler, stronger and more principled than ever. And I would continue as well, wiser for the experience and grateful for the clarity that comes from surviving your worst heartbreak. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. But sometimes, if we're strong enough, we can survive even that and emerge victorious on the other side.